The Authors Forum exists to inspire success.
Welcome to the Authors Forum. I'm your host, Dr. Veronica Esagui, and my guest today is HelenWand. She is a writer and historian, and she wrote the book Where Eagles Nest, the second wave of pioneers. So, Helen, welcome to the Authors Forum.
Thank you.
Helen, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and how it was like growing up in the rugged hills in Oregon?
Well, we lived on a farm. In order to keep us in the fields working, my dad told us stories while we were in the fields. And I loved the stories. It was worth being out in the field to hear the stories. And I compiled them in my mind for many years, but I didn't do anything with them. I was busy with life. I retired in '98 from the lab and thought, this is kind of boring. I think I'll take a writing class. And so the rest is history. It took me 12 years to write the book, but hopefully the next one won't take quite that long.
But it took you 12 years to write Where Eagles Nest, but you had a lot of it written already, right? In your mind?
In my mind.
In your mind.
I did, yes.
Okay. So what was it that drew you to writing such a book?
Well, having lived in the gorge and knowing the climate, how rugged the climate is, and the difficulties of just when we were growing up, as far as, the snowstorms, the electricity going out, the large gardens that we had to feed the family that Dad had, all those things, it was almost like I was on the tail end when I was a child, at the tail end of the homesteading era. And it was so fascinating to me to know that the people that before me that came and settled in that area had so few tools to do what we did, and they did it, and they lived, and they thrived, and they actually built a community there. That the fascination was, the story was so rich that I felt like I needed to tell it. I really did.
Now, you mentioned that you had retired.
I worked in the clinical lab. Kaiser Microbiology is where I worked for the last 25 years.
But you're still working now. I understand you still work.
Well, I teach now.
You teach. Oh, that's work. Actually, that's a lot of work, teaching.
That is work.
You got to come up with something new all the time, right?
Yeah, that's
And what
true.
do you teach now?
Clinical lab assistant. So I just took my lab training and experience in the lab and developed a lab assistant class.
So
program.
writing takes you away from that and puts you in a whole different world.
It does.
Something that you're comfortable with, where you grew up, with a little bit more of a socially easier way of living.
It is.
Right?
It is.
Okay.
You can just let your imagination go wild.
How much land did you live in?
Well, we only had our little home place was only 6 acres, but my father farmed with his 2 brothers, and so I think all told, they probably, when I was a child, they probably farmed about 30 acres.
Wow, that's a lot of farming.
Yeah, all truck farms, so it's,
When did you first discover your passion for writing?
I think it's when I started taking the writing classes that I really thought, oh, this is really nice. I really like this.
You didn't mind people telling you this is not good, or can you change it?
I knew it was terrible when I first started there. They didn't have to even tell me. I knew it was terrible. But, I've been really fortunate, and the classes that I took and the writers group that I belong to have been very, very supportive and helpful. It's a very safe place.
What's the name of the group?
A Chrysalis Writing Group at Clackamas Community College. It's a writers group for women, and probably one of the most supportive groups I've ever worked with, as far as in any capacity, really.
Do you have to be a student?
No, No. You do not have to be a student. You sign up for it, but you don't pay for it. You don't have to pay for it, but they would like you to register for it.
So they put you on the genre, in the genre?
No, you can, any genre, any genre. We've got people that are writing memoirs, we have poets, we have novelists, we have a gal that is a wonderful short story writer. We listen to everybody.
Good. That's good because it gives you a whole wide view of the different styles, correct?
Oh, it does. I do not think that you can write good prose unless you have a little bit of poet in you.
Very interesting. I like that. Matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, it felt like a poem to me, even though it's not a poem, but you wrote in the very beginning under Where Eagles Nest, the second wave of pioneers. You wrote, the second wave of pioneers, after years of delay, the railroad from St. Paul to the Northwest finally opened on September 8, 1883, allowing accessibility. Am I saying that word right?
Accessibility.
That's a tough one. For throngs of people to immigrate to Portland. So that's how they started coming. By the time the first train arrived, the initial wave of pioneers had come by sea or overland by wagon, growing the little town on the banks of the Willamette River to a population of 17,600 people. 17 years later, in 1900, the second wave of pioneers continued to arrive by rail and had increased that number to over 90,000. Kind of like a poem, right?
It is kind of, I never thought about it, but it is kind of, yeah.
This is how this book is written very well, very almost scientific, but yet has a heart beating in it. Because when you start reading the book, there's the very romantic two characters that you have, which I just understand that they are your great-grandparents, and how they were very young and fell in love, and out of love, she followed him to America, and this was in the 1800s. 1881, they came to the United States. That was 133 years ago.
Yes, 133 years.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the Pleasant View School.
I love the Pleasant View School.
Okay.
I love the Pleasant View School. The story about the Pleasant View School is that one day when I was quite young in grade school, we were sitting at the supper table, and I asked my daddy where he went to school. I said, Daddy, where did you go to school? And he kind of thumbed his way like that. He was sitting with his back to the road, right up there. And I said, right up where? When he said, right up there where Dorothy Overby lives. That's our neighbor. And I thought, why would they build a school in the middle of nowhere? And then I realized, as I did this historical research, that the part of Wand Road that we lived in and grew up on was part of the oldest trail that is known, at least coming down the gorge, from the Native Americans used it to go back and forth to their favorite fishing grounds, which were Slidell Falls to the Willamette Falls. And then when the telegraph came along, and the Dalles to Portland Telegraph, they just used that trail and hung the wire on glass spools on trees. And Dad said when he was a little boy, the spools were still there. And they started calling it the Wire Trail. And then in 1916, when they opened the Scenic Highway, it was part of the Scenic Highway. But Wand Road is not part of the Scenic Highway. Wand Road is still Wand Road. It's very rural. And the grove of trees where the school, Pleasant View School, stood is still there. Wow. They used the lumber from the school to build the neighbor's house.
There were several letters written in your book. And there was one particular one in here that I thought that very much describes what it was like to live in the 1800s. Page 105, it was fall 1885, Hobart, Oregon, United States of America. November 10, 1885. Dearest Do you say Mutter?
Mutter.
Mutter. That would be German, for those that are not familiar with it. Okay. And this is a letter going from Juliana, who was your great-great-grandmother.
Just great.
Just great? Okay, one great-grandmother. To her family in Germany.
In Baden, Germany.
Okay. So, dearest Mutter, we finally arrived. We moved into Catherine and Francis' home on October 8th. The men borrowed Taylor's team and wagon. They took Catherine's stove, the windows for the house, and some of our household necessities and hauled them up the hill. It was a heavy load, but his horses are young and the road was dry. Okay. They came back to the cabin and loaded the rest of our things, and we rode back up with them. Tracy, who was to become
my grandmother,
your grandmother, was thrilled with the horses and the ride. Truthfully, I would rather walked, but the men would not hear of it. You girls have to move into our home in style, Franz told us. The men are so proud of the house. One of the windows arrived broken. Catherine and I were unhappy because it was the kitchen window, the one that looks out over the trail coming into the place. I guess there was the only road there too, right?
Part of it they made themselves.
Made themselves, yeah. The opening is boarded up, and we work in a dark kitchen, much like when we lived in Taylor's cabin. The men promised us a new window as soon as spring arrives. The week following the move, Franz and Alex went to the Evans farm near the Harlesburst district south of here. They bought 2 bushels of cabbages, 300 pounds of potatoes, and 2 bushels of carrots. My goodness. Okay, and I buy 3-4 carrots in the market, and I think I got enough. I'm sure these won't be enough for winter, but he promised to deliver more if we need it. By then, how many children did she have?
She only had Tracy.
Oh, only Tracy? Okay. He had a poor onion crop, so we were unable to get any, but he did sell us 3 large bags of unshelled dried beans. They also brought us a special treat, freshly dried Italian prunes, and 2 bushels of apples and pears. I guess these were the closest to the grocery they had, huh?
That was it. That was it. Yeah, that was the grocery.
We dried the apples and pears as soon as we got our stove working. The men love Catherine's apple kitchen. What do they mean by that? The men love Catherine's apple.
Kuchen is cake.
Ah, oh, Kuchen. Yeah. Cake. Ah, see, I was reading as kitchen. Yeah. Okay. Everything seems to be storing well in the cellar. The only thing we're having trouble with is flour. It gets wormy so fast. Franz brought us a 5-gallon tin container with a tight lid the other day. We're going to try that and see if it keeps it better. Flour is expensive, and the men have to carry those heavy sacks all the way up to that steep trail. Wow. I get tired just reading it.
I do too.
This is just amazing. And then we bought onions and some more potatoes and carrots from Fred Smith, who lives not far from Mr. Evans. He also sold us a butchered hog last month. And it just goes on and on. I mean, this is absolutely amazing. This is history. And these kind of books are very valuable, even in school. Children should be reading about it because how many people know about this kind of living?
Yeah, they really don't. They really don't.
I better stop there. What was it like for you to dive into the life of your ancestors?
Well, it was kind of emotional, actually. I knew, we were really fortunate, and we spent all of our growing up years with our grandmother, and she still lived on part of the homestead. I was sort of immersed in it from childhood, and then to go back and visit it was, and to ferret out the humanness of these people. It was kind of an interesting experience. I guess I learned a lot about myself too when I did that. I didn't realize that as an author you do put yourself out there a little bit, which is all right. But
right. You did a lot of research.
Emotional thing. Yeah, and then I did a lot of research. And you know, when you do research, it's really kind of fun because all of a sudden you go off on some tangent that oh, that's so interesting. And you start reading it, but you don't use it in the book, but you use the feeling that you get. It gives you a feeling of the era. I asked one writer one time that wrote a book, I was at a author's fair and I was talking to him and I said, oh, that must have taken a ton of research. And he said, oh, you wouldn't believe it. He said, I don't think I put a 20th of my research in the book. But he said, I wouldn't have been able to write the book without all that research.
Is it going to be a sequel to Where Eagles Nest?
There is.
Good.
There is.
Because I wanted to know what happens to Juliana and all the little children, and there's just so much to it, and it's begging for a sequel. And what is the sequel about?
Well, I haven't named it yet. I've got about 19 chapters, first draft. And it's going to be about Juliana's plight and how she handles it. And the neighbors, of course, grandmother always told me that her mother always said they would never have survived up there without the neighbors. And so I'm going to bring that in. And then I'm going to bring in the young man, Frank, who comes into the family's life, and he hears about them in Portland, about this young widow that's out in the country in Troutdale that needs help. And he goes and talks to her and tells her that he would like to work for her. And she said, but I have no money. And he said, I don't want money, I want land.
Oh.
And so he went to work for her. And apparently he was dashing because my grandmother eventually married him.
Oh, really? Oh, so she had the next life after Alex.
Yes. So not my great-grandmother, my Tracy.
Oh,
Tracy is my
excellent.
grandmother. And so she married him down the road a little bit. But
wow.
So,
another romance.
Generation.
Another love, romance
love.
going on.
Yes.
Yeah, you have a lot of love in your family.
Well, it's kind of nice.
Yes. That's what life is all about,
that's
right?
what life is all about. That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. So when do you know the book is finished? Like now the next one coming, how would you know the book is done?
You know, a lot of people tell me that, I should outline and I should know all the chapters before I start writing, and I don't do any of that. I just sit down and I sort of have an idea about where I want to go and what I want to say. And then I sit down and somebody else takes over. I think it's my muse. And I just was told. I didn't know where it was going to end. And all of a sudden it said, why don't you just end it right here, Helen? Yeah. And so I did.
Yeah.
I mean, whoever that is, the muse.
Yes.
The muse said,
yes.
End it right here. But when I wrote that, when I got to that place, I knew that was the end of the book. That had to be the end of that chapter in her life. So the second book will be the next chapter in Julianne's life, and it will begin to see the children start growing up and start getting their own lives.
Do some of these characters, even though they did exist and some of them are gone,
right,
have they come back to you? Do they speak to you as a writer? I don't mean as a ghost.
Yes, no, they do. They do. They do speak to me. I hear my grandmother's stories. I hear my dad's stories. I feel like I knew my great-grandparents now, since I wrote about them. Their friends, Franz and Catherine. I feel like I knew them. I know that that's true. The Frummelts, I knew some of the Frummelt family when I was growing up. They still lived on their home place, right? Catacorner adjacent to the Lampert family. So I do. I felt like I knew them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
What do you want the readers to take from reading your book? What's the message? It's the kind of a question everybody wants to know. Why did you write the book? What's the message in that book?
I think one of the messages, my father was very, very attached to, we used to call it the Hill, which is the Pleasant View district up on the bluff above the Sandy River. And I think that attachment to the land was something that I really was raised with, and I wanted to get that across. I wanted people to know that these people weren't just farmers, but they had a real attachment to this area. And people do, I mean, it's not just this area, that's what people feel like that about the land.
You self-published.
I did.
And I want to congratulate you on that.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, it's an incredible achievement that you do it yourself. And any author, any writer that wants to write their book, it takes a lot of work. It's not just that simple. A lot of writers feel that if they just write and get a publisher to print their book, the thing is they don't really have much to say about their book cover.
See,
and you did.
That's why I didn't want to, I wanted to self-publish because I knew what I wanted on that book cover. And I knew that they wouldn't do that. So I don't know if you recognize that bluff, but I took that picture in the middle of the main street of Old Town Troutdale.
Oh.
At sunset. And I just parked the car, ran in the middle of the street, snapped the picture, ran back, and I didn't get hit. I thought that was pretty good. And then I took it over to a camera shop, and they photoshopped out all the buildings. It's
beautiful. Very well done. And you also had the choice of putting a picture in the center of your great-grandparents, Julianne and with Juliana and Alex. I got very attached to both of them. They were my heroes by the time we were done with the book. It took a lot of courage, a lot of courage to live in those times. And I mean, they could have very well chosen to live in the city.
Yes,
right?
Where it would have been comfortable. Yes,
exactly.
And I often wondered how, if she ever thought that she made a mistake and moved to the. I also wondered if she thought she'd made a mistake in the end by leaving her family, because in those days, once you left your family, there was no text messaging. You left your family and you went and you were 18 or 19 or 20 and you never saw them again in your life.
Exactly, and I also read in the book it took them a month for the ship to get to New York.
Right.
1 month on a ship.
Right.
I can't even imagine that unless I was taking a world cruise.
Right.
That would be a little bit different, right? For the world cruise, stopping at a port every once in a while. So I would say that was incredible. They had to be very strong people. Yeah. The positives, I can see there's lots of positives about publishing your own book. Were there any negatives?
It was so easy for me to write the book, I have to say. I mean, I know it sounds strange, but it was easy to write the book. The hard part was writing all the little bios and all the little things that you need to write about it. That's what was very hard. And also the editing. I think we edited that thing about 13 times and are going to re-edit again for the second printing.
Yeah. Well, you know, the thing about editing, it can just keep on going and going and going. And there's always somebody that will say, well, this might sound better this way or that way. But it doesn't necessarily mean, you know, I read it, it was very smooth, the reading.
Oh, good, thank you.
When I read your book, it was very smooth. What is the thing in your life that you wish you could change in the past?
About the book or?
About your life.
This is about my life. I wish that I would have listened to my mother, and when she said, why don't you major in English when you go to college? And I said, I don't want to major in English. Mom, I know that stuff. What a mistake.
Well, you've come a long way. I think if she was to read your book, she'd be very proud of it.
I would have loved to have her read my book.
Yeah, I'm sure she's smiling right upon you right now.
Thank you.
One very important question. How many children did you have?
I had none.
Oh, okay.
I had none. Although I was the oldest of 8, so I raised some. Well, there were 8 children in Juliana. Actually, there were 9 children in Juliana's family. She raised 8 of them. And then when Mother and Dad got married, I was the oldest of 8 in their family. So of the Wand children, I was the oldest of 8. So as the oldest, I helped raise my little brothers and sisters. I like to think of it that way. I did my duty early on. I didn't have to do it anymore.
Are you keeping track? Do you ever have like a family reunion where everybody...
Oh, yes. We have sibling reunions every year and wand family unions every year. So we try to keep track of each other, yeah.
Where can our viewers and audience get the book from?
Oh, yeah, that's a good thing. I have a website. Mm-hmm. It's www.HelenWandBooks with an S.com.
Wand, W-A-N-D.
Yes, HelenWand books.com. And there's a place on there to order a book.
Okay. And do you have any... Yeah, go ahead.
Vista House has them. Multnomah Falls is going to have them in May. Mm-hmm. And the Troutdale Depot Museum has them also. So they're available.
I would definitely get them into museums too.
Okay. I will do that.
There's another good place for your book because it's a historical book.
It
should definitely be in the museums.
I'd like to get it in the Oregon Historical Society bookstore. I'm hoping to do that.
Oh, yeah. We'll talk about that after the interview.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
And do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with our audience? Anything inspiring for anyone, including myself?
Oh, I don't have really any words of wisdom. I tried really hard to keep politics out of the book, but there is one social political statement in the book, and so that I won't say what it is, but whoever reads the book, maybe they can figure it out.
Ah, is it in the beginning, the middle, or the end?
It's closer to the end.
Ah.
It's closer to the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what will have to be.
The riddle. That is the riddle.
The riddle, yeah. So it's kind of like a mystery book, too.
Yeah,
a little tiny little hint there. Keep the audience wondering about it. I would like to finish this with your acknowledgments. You mentioned the Chrysalis Writers Group at Clackamas Community College, which you mentioned about it. And I'd like to add that the Northwest Writers and Publishers Association that meets once a month at the Tualatin Public Library. That is a group that also offers help to many of the authors and future authors. And it's a group for networking for publishers, editors, book cover designers, and so on. So, and we meet here once a month. So thank you, Helen, for being here today, being our guest.
Much.
And until the next time, have a most inspiring week.